Ever since I posted a picture a couple of months ago of my new Kimber K6S DCR on Instagram and on my Patreon page, people have been asking me, when are you going to do a review of this gun? When are you going to let us know what you think of this gun? People are very curious about this gun because it's one of the only major introductions of a totally new gun, a totally new revolver from a company that's not really a revolver company to come along in quite a while. And because of that, I was very anxious for this gun, but also kind of skeptical about how good it would be. But now that I've had the gun for a couple of months and I've had it to the range several times, put hundreds of rounds through it, I think now I can pretty much tell you what I think of it. But first, I want to go over all the features of the gun and point out the major points to this gun, the guns that they really put a lot of time into designing. Now, a lot of people will say that this is just a Ruger SP101 with 6 shots. And it is not. That could not be further from the truth. It does have a couple similarities with a Ruger. The main one being that it is a cast frame. It is not a forged metal frame, it's a cast metal frame, and therefore it has a very similar look to the Ruger SP101. And it also has a push-button style cylinder release here, which is also very similar to the Ruger SP101 and the Ruger GP100, but that's pretty much where the similarities end. So let's actually take a look at the features, and I will cover those two aspects a little bit more as I do so, and show you all the good things about this gun, and possibly maybe the one bad thing about this gun. First off, let's talk about what does the DCR model mean, because this is the DCR model. It basically means it's got a little bit of a nicer finish on the stainless steel, it's got these nice fancy wood grips, and it's got a red fiber optic front sight. That's pretty much all DCR means. It still has the match grade trigger, the 6-round cylinder, still pretty much the same gun with a few cosmetic differences and a little bit of a sight difference. Now, as I did already mention, the gun does have a cast frame, and it has that cast frame look that everyone's familiar with Rugers. They're a little bit thicker in some places, so, they do have a distinctive look to them. And a lot of people might think that that's what I'm going to say the one bad thing about the gun is, because it's cast and not forged, because, people have a real problem with mem parts, etc., anything that's cast. But, that's not really an issue. It's not an issue at all. The process that they use to cast these guns nowadays, like this gun and the Rugers, is such a good process that the difference between them and the forged guns is minimal. These just have to be a tiny bit thicker, then they're every bit as strong. One thing I do want to point out about the frame is it is beveled at pretty much every edge. The front around the barrel, around the front of the frame, around the back of the frame, around the top of the frame. I mean, this gun has just been beveled all to hell and back, and it looks nice and it makes the gun very comfortable. There's like no sharp edges on this gun. The only sharp edge on it is the sight, and even that's not that sharp. So this gun, as far as being manufactured, even though it's cast, it's done so very well. I mean, every seam is nice and even and nice and flush. Every edge is nice and rounded over or polished down. It's just a really nicely put together gun, and it really shows an attention to detail, so I will give it top marks on that. Now, the main feature of this gun is that it is 6 rounds instead of 5, although it is kind of a J-frame size gun. And you can see here it is 6 rounds. And not only is it 6 rounds, but one thing I wanted to point out here is look how well done the chambers are. They are recessed. You don't see that a lot anymore. Recessed chambers allow the bullets to set flush in the cylinder, so you don't have to have a big gap between the cylinder and the back of the gun. As you can see here, when this gun cylinder is closed, there's almost no gap. So that right there is a really high quality feature. I give this gun top marks for that. Now, another thing I want to point out about the cylinder real quick is instead of having the traditional flutes cut into the cylinder, the deep cut flutes, this is more shaved at every top angle here. Between each cylinder, it has a shaved off section, which makes it thinner. Even though it's a 6-round cylinder, it's not that thick because of that shaving, because you always have a little shaved off instead of just a deep groove through here. So even though it's 6 shots, it's quite slim. Now, as I said earlier, the gun does have a push-button style cylinder release here. So it is very similar, like I said, to a Ruger in that aspect, but this one seems much nicer than the Ruger one. It's much more responsive, it feels more solid. I don't really have a big problem with the Ruger one, but this one does seem a step above the Ruger cylinder release, and it is shaped a little differently. So the way they operate is pretty much the only thing similar between the two releases. Now, the grips that come on this model, since it is the DSR, are very nice. They are on the small side. You're not going to get a lot of fingers on there. It is a 2-finger grip, not a 3-finger grip, but they're nice. They're a really beautiful wood. Now, this doesn't come with this grip on every model. Usually they're plastic or different colored plastic grips, but these wood grips and the plastic grips, like I say, they're small, but they are comfortable. They do allow you to get a good hold on the gun, but you're not going to be using your pinky if you have man-sized hands. Now, another thing to talk about here is the sights. All the K6S's have this dovetailed rear sight. You can get night sights, blackout sights, but they're all these dovetailed rear sights instead of being a gutter sight like they are on most small revolvers. And the front sight on this model is a fiber optic front sight. As you can see, it's red fiber optic. Now you can get this with a night sight or just a standard white dot sight. This can also have white dot sights for the rear, but this one has the blackout rear and the fiber optic front, which I really like. I would probably go for the night sights if I had a choice, but this is what I could find and I'm happy with it. Now, another thing we definitely need to mention is the trigger. It is a match grade trigger and it is a very nice, smooth, crisp trigger. I mean, I don't really know if there's a better double action only trigger on a revolver. I would give this top-notch merits here as far as double action only triggers go. It is just a really nice trigger. It's smooth, it breaks perfectly, and it's real easy to stage. As you see here, you can really easily stage the trigger if you want to fire off a shot that's as similar to single action as you can get. It's real easy to stage the trigger here. You can do it pretty much every time. And that trigger really shows at the range. At the range, this gun is pretty daggone accurate for a small gun, especially for a gun in double action. If you stage that trigger, you can get a pretty accurate shot off, especially if you take that little extra time to stage that trigger. But even if you fire in double action, it's pretty easy to keep it on target. Now, as far as recoil is concerned, it's a little bit snappy, but it is a small .357 Magnum gun. And as far as its size is concerned, especially when you consider it's got a 2-finger grip, it handles recoil very well. Now, I'm not the most recoil sensitive person, so I'm not the best to ask about, is it a little bit painful or is it a little bit snappy? My hands are old and dead. I don't think I have hardly any nerve endings left, so I don't really feel it that bad. But this gun seems to be pretty comfortable to shoot. I would think that pretty much anyone from a 14-year-old, an average size woman, average size man, on up to your Hulkbusters, if you can get your hands on the grip, you can fire this gun fairly comfortably. Now that I've talked about all the great features of this gun that are really top-notch features, this revolver is really top-notch. And I've told you that at the range, it's very nice. It's actually nice for a small gun. I'm going to have to say now what that one thing I don't like about it is. And that is the fact that it is double action only. I don't really have any place in my life for a double action only revolver that I think is still a little too big to stick in a pocket. Because the only reason you would ever want this is if you were going to pocket carry. And I wouldn't think that a heavy stainless steel revolver of this size is really good for pocket carry. There's very few guns that are small enough to pocket carry, in my opinion, for me as a person. So this gun just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me why someone would use all those other features, why they put all those other nice features on this gun. Like everything is an A+ feature on this gun until you get to this. And this was just a bad idea as far as I'm concerned. This gun needs a hammer. If it had a hammer, this would be one of the best small revolvers on the market. But because of this flaw that takes away that ability to have that super light, super accurate single action trigger, it just fails. It adds up like it's a 10 in every category till you get down to the one that matters the most. Does this gun make sense? And is this a gun you would want to have on you if things went bad? And because of that lack of a hammer, it really wouldn't be my top choice. It wouldn't even be in the top 10 of my choices. So even though I think every feature of this gun, pretty much other than that, is perfect, the gun itself kind of sucks because it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And other guns are better because they have that single action option. Other guns that maybe not as good in every other feature are better overall because they do what a revolver should do, and that's give you both double action and single action. So I'm going to have to say in the end, this gun gets a failing mark from me simply because it doesn't do what a revolver should do. It isn't what a revolver should be, in my opinion. So for me, it's just not worth it. But I will have to say, I did find one accessory for this gun. And it's kind of an accessory where it's been around for a while, but I've never liked how they did it. And when I saw this one, I was like, well, finally, someone did it right. And I'm thinking that that accessory might just save this gun and make it worth having until they come out with a version that has a hammer. But you know what? That's another video. So stay tuned. I should soon have a video on that accessory and whether it makes this gun that's perfect in pretty much every way except being what I want it to be, whether it makes that gun a little bit more acceptable and makes it worth keeping in my rotation.